Okay, so I'm hoping that we had the opportunity to look back at what we introduced on Saturday, and particularly okay, so like I said, what we did on Sunday was assume knowledge from earlier studies. So it's expected, like I also said, that's not the kind of thing you're going to see in the exam. You're going to see other things that are a little bit more interesting. So look at our study of advanced variances. So advanced variances, we're looking more in detail about variances. Now, before we start, there are a number of factors that will make it necessary for an organization to look in detail at the variances that occur in a period. One of the first things you consider, so we're saying it's not every time that a variance occurs that it should bother an organization. So I want to give an example now. So suppose an organization has the following variances. So usage, so they have a usage variance. The budgeted cost is 120,000, and the variance is 200 adverse. Then they also have labor rates. The budgeted cost is 42,000. And the variance is 9,000 favorable, and they have labor efficiency the budgeted cost is 32,000, and then the variance is 600 or 60 favorable. Now, all other things being equal, which of these variances will management be worried about? Which of these variances will management focus on?
Let me attempt. Ordinary here, it should be material usage.
Labor rate.
Labor
Rate.
Why?
Because it's the highest there. Is it worth checking? When you have little, the cost for checking, for verifying, for going deeper, it's not,
my favorable.
justify doing the process.
Favorable.
Do you get what he's saying? Does everybody get what he's saying?
No.
No.
We said that the material usage cost, expected cost, budgeted cost was 12,000, and the variance was 200 adverse. And budgeted cost for labor rate was 42,000, and the variance was 9,000 favorable, and labor efficiency was 32,000, and the variance was 60 favorable. And I asked, which one will management consider under normal circumstances? Someone said, of course, the material usage because it's adverse. And another person said, the labor rate. Now, I'll just buttress his point because that's the correct answer. The correct answer will be the labor rate variance because of materiality, because of the significance of the variance compared to the size. So 9,000 is material to 42,000, and 200 is a very small variance. However, there are a few things for us to consider, like I said. So this brings us nicely to the factors to consider over a period. So this would be a materiality example. However, there are a number of things to consider. So of course, one will be that materiality. Number two will be recurring items. Number three okay, is everybody with me?
Yes.
So you get the concept of materiality, right?
Yes.
No.
So basically where the variance is significant compared to the budget, or expected, then that should be considered. So whether the variance is favorable or adverse. And so I can see very easily your examiner trying to play this one on you and asking you this kind of question now, and looking at those variances. Maybe one adverse that most people will look at and say, ah, it's adverse. But adverse is very small. When you have a 9,000 favorable to 42,000, that's a very, very significant item. And that's something that should be worrisome under normal circumstances. Do you get the point? So this
No.
is, what's no?
Can I get the
Okay, just come in. What we call exceptional reporting. Exceptional reporting is particularly important with variances. So where you have an item that is exceptional, and we go back again, you have variances of 200 adverse and 60 favorable. These are normal. You expect that you're not God, so you expect that your plan and what will happen will differ slightly. So those are not abnormal issues. However, when you have an exceptional item like this, a variance of 9,000. So if you look at the performance over the period, only this variance of 9,000 will sway performance either to or from. So whether it was adverse or favorable, that huge variance will have a very significant effect. So one of the things that will be done in this case is for management to consider whether the variance is as a result of performance or the variance is actually as a result of a faulty standard. Maybe the standard in itself was faulty at the beginning, and that has led to this kind of very significant variance. So what we will look at when we're looking at variances, what will be most worrisome to management will be items that are very significantly different from the budget. The actual is very significantly different from the budget because like Mr. Richard said, the cost of carrying out variance analysis might outweigh the benefits if your variances are negligible. So if your variance, for example, is 200 of a 12,000 or 60 of a 32,000, whether favorable or adverse, the pursuing why these variances have occurred and trying to sort them out might not be a very good use of money, because by the time you do all the approximations and everything, you find out that there's virtually nothing remaining. There's no, you can't find what the cost was.
So,
Did you get that?
Sorry, Brian, can you please summarize? I rephrase, please. I went off. My network went off. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, my went off.
So I said materiality is a consideration that will be taken when looking at variances. So a significant variance will be considered well ahead of an insignificant. So at times you might have insignificant small variances because the amount is not very large. The variance is very small. Then you can actually ignore that variance even if it is adverse. However, where you have very significant deviation from standard, where you have the budgets significantly different from actual, then whether the variance is favorable or adverse, there will still be a need to consider it. And this is what we call exceptional reporting. So in exceptional reporting, so the focus on large deviations from the plan. That's what we'll be reporting about. That's what we'll be considering. However, very, very related to this, and something that we have to balance materiality with the second point I'm making, which is recurring items. Now, some variances might be small in themselves in a particular period, but because those variances are frequently occurring and they are occurring over long periods of time, the aggregation of these variances now make them significant, and so they should be considered. Do you get the point?
Yes.
Yes. Please, can you repeat one more time?
Okay, some variances might be small individually in different periods. However, because they occur over and over, the aggregation becomes significant, and so there would be need for management to focus on them. Okay, so that's the second one. So recurring items, because even though like this 200 adverts now might be 200 adverts, and so because it is small, it is immaterial and can be ignored. However, if the variance continues occurring over and over, then it now becomes that 200 aggregating over 20 periods now becomes 4,000, and you see from a small insignificant item to a quite significant item when you aggregate it over a number of periods, and so there'll be need for consideration. The third point is controllability. This is very important. This is very, very, very important. A focus by management on items outside its control might not be a useful activity or a sensible activity. Variances should or the reason for the occurrence of a variance should be considered in the light of whether that variance so should be considered in the light of whether that variance is whether the reasons for that variance are within management's control. So controllability is the next factor that will make the consideration of a variance and why an entity will consider having a further look into a variance. Now, I think that over the period that we've worked, one of the things I've constantly done is, I don't know what the word is, encourage, advise, admonish us to look at technical articles. Now, there's a particular technical article on variances. I think it's mix and yield variance, where the examiner breaks down at least the discursive parts of some of the things we are going to look at. And as always, I have tried to emphasize the significance of technical articles in your preparation for the exams. So please do well. I think this is the fourth or the fifth one now that I've emphasized particularly. I've said that the technical articles are important, but the most important ones are the ones that I am emphasizing over our studies. Okay. Now, 4, the trend of variances. So if variances continue rising, then that should be a cause for I'd rather discuss that under recurring items. What I'll consider rather will be the independence of the variances, independence or otherwise of variances, or interdependence. So basically, a variance might be related to another variance. This is really causation and correlation, basically. So because a variance is related to another variance, then the same factor might have caused those variances to occur. So if you're able to stop the factor that is causing a particular variance to occur, then you might be able to have a hand on why you're having particular variances or particular results over a period. So being able to address the factors influencing one might enable the other to be checked. So for example, now we can think of a factor such as demotivation, non-motivation, where staffs are not motivated. Now, staff not being motivated might lead to an adverse material usage variance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It might also lead to an adverse labor efficiency variance.
Yeah.
If we're able to check that staff demotivation, then we're able to kill two birds with one stone. That kind of thing is what we're talking about the interdependence of variances.
Or of quality on usage,
Sir?
price,
I didn't
quality.
hear you.
Quality of material on usage, price, and then labor efficiency.
Yeah, those kind of things. So we're saying that there might be interdependence. We're expecting that this particular factor, if it is wrong, then we'll see a number of things, a number of adverse variances. We'll not be surprised about them. If we're able to check that factor, then we're able to sort the problem from the root, and then we'll not be having. So if we're looking at independent variances without looking at the factors that are causing them, and the fact that there's an interrelationship between them, then maybe we would have missed a trick or two. Okay, and then one final one, and then we'll move on. This wasn't my plan. So the type of standard so if the standard used for assessment is faulty, then the variances might not have very much meaning. So a case in thought might be, so for example, if an ideal standard is used, what do we expect?
Adverse.
Then it is likely that both variances will be adverse, abi?
Yeah.
Now, if and if a basic standard is being used where the trend is going up, then what will happen is your basic standard will no longer be reflective of current reality, and essentially your basic standard is faulty. So those are the issues that we're looking at. Now let's go to our work for the day.
Brian, I've been requesting for
Are you back?
record. I've been requesting for record.
Yeah, I've been waiting for you now. I've been waiting for you.
requesting.
Oh, Mr. Rashid is back, Abi. No, I'm coming. I'll grant you now. All right, we're starting.
I've sent a request, please.
I'm coming.
No, anybody will just. Brian, you've still not accepted though.
Yeah, I know. I'm coming.
Okay.
Now, first thing to note is that material. Okay, so let me put material first in front. Material mix and yield. Or let me say that the other way. The material, and please pay great attention. This is why we've taken so much time to build before we got here. The material usage variance can be broken into the mix and the yield. Okay, so let me say that can be broken into two components. So the mix and the yield. Now, mix and yield variances are useful when there are two things that will be important for mix and yield variances to be useful. Number one is there is more than one input, more than one material input into the production process. And two, management has some level of discretion in the combination of the different inputs. So these are the two preconditions for us to use material mix and yield. So for example, now a company that makes cars, the standard input into, for example, a Honda Accord 2015 model, and I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm just saying, there's no way that management can reduce the tires or the number of tires or the size of the tire or the width of the dashboard or any of those kind of things. So in that kind of case, even though there are many components, there are many inputs into the production of that kind of car, mix and yield variance will not be appropriate for that. However, if in a bread factory, for example, the amount of flour or yeast or butter or sugar that will be used for a loaf of bread can be altered by management, maybe because of price or because of shortages, and that will work. So you see the two extremes between where management has discretion in the amount of input and where management doesn't have discretion.
Okay, so literally, this mix and yield is literal mixing of stuff to get a product.
I didn't hear you.
I said, this mix and yield literally means mix and yield. That is mixing something to you get a yield, right?
Yeah, we'll see two of them now. We'll even define them. The mix variance deals with how much combination of the cheaper and the more expensive one are in getting the output. So for example, if we think about, let's go back to our standard loaf of bread. What are the components of a loaf? What are the things that will make a loaf?
Flour.
You said?
Flour, margarine,
The flour, water,
margarine,
butter and margarine are, one is water in oil, the other one is oil in water.
Milk,
There's
sugar.
No, there's milk inside bread.
Yes, ma'am.
It depends on the type of, depends on the type.
Looking at agege bread.
Potassium bromate.
You said coconut. Potassium bromate. You see the two extremes of people that have problem in this class. One say potassium bromate, the other one say coconut. That's the height of, I don't know what to call it. So two different kinds of problems.
He said agege bread.
One is suicidal, the other one is suicidal. Two different types of suicide. We don't know. So flour, butter, sugar. I'm looking for one other thing.
Yeast.
There's no egg in bread. Yeast. Okay. So if we're looking at which of these products, which of these is most expensive? So let's rank them.
Butter.
Butter, definitely. So first, butter.
Yeah, butter.
Second will be who?
Flour.
Is that sugar?
The flour.
Flour. Yeah, I think so. So I think so. Flour will be second.
The sugar is.
Okay.
So sugar third.
Wait, a bag of flour and a bag of sugar. Which one is more expensive?
To be flour.
Let's just take it like that. Let's take it like that.
Okay.
Well, I'm pretty sure that I think that my experience says that this is relatively right. So in terms of cost now, that's what we're doing here. So cost. Components of a loaf of bread. We are doing a ranking for costs. So if we have that now see what the mix and the yield variance does. Now let's assume that there is a standard, say, and please so that we don't waste time on this. Let's assume there is 5 grams of each of these 4 products that will be combined to get a loaf of bread. So 5 grams of each. Now, if that is the standard, and then in the actual product, we now use more of maybe we use 6 grams of butter, 7 grams of flour, 3 grams of sugar, and 2 grams of yeast. What is happening is now that we've now used more of the more expensive components. So the butter and the flour, we've used more than the standard. And then for the sugar and the yeast, we've used less of the standard. And I'm using a very, very clear example, as in very deviant example, so that, I don't know what that deviant was, but an example that will be clear like night and day. So flour, butter are more expensive, sugar, yeast, less expensive. Now, we had a 5 gram component for a loaf of bread, and we ended up using 6 and 7 for butter and flour, and 3 and 2 for sugar and yeast. So much so that we used more of the more expensive and less of the less expensive. What will happen is that we'll see that our mix variance will be adverse, because our mix now, our actual mix is more expensive than our standard mix.
Yeah.
Because we have used more of the more expensive one. However, the
what is the
yield,
standard mix?
I usually say, you said what?
What is the standard mix? What should have been the standard mix?
I said 5 gram, 5 gram, 5 gram, 5 gram, 5 gram for all of them, and I'm just being simplistic. I'm not arguing. You can't use 5 gram of yeast and 5 gram of flour. It doesn't even make sense. However, I'm keeping things simple so that we can get the understanding. So if they were supposed to be 5, 5, 5, 5, and you used 7, 6, 3, 2, so you use more of the more expensive one and less of the less expensive ones in your actual than in your standard, then you will have an adverse mix.
Yeah.
Now, what the yield does, you get the point, Abi?
Yeah, yeah.
If anybody is paying attention, then this will be crystal clear. Now, on the other hand, the yield is kind of a measure of how much output you are able to get from the input. Now, generally, yield is like a measure, yield is a measure of quality. So the higher the quality, the better your yield. Generally, what you will see is when you put in the more quality inputs. So generally, when you're looking at bread with high butter content will generally be more quality, more blah blah. What's blah blah in English?
Fluffy. Fluffy.
Fluffy.
Yeah, more blah blah than the other one, than a bread that has very little butter. So the idea is that as you put in more of the higher quality and most of the time higher cost input, you will generally get a better yield. And if we think about what yield is, even in English, it's synonymous with quality. So the yield variance is basically an estimation of how much output was gotten from the input into that production process. While the mix is just looking at, did we use more of the more expensive or less of the more expensive in the standard than in the actual than in the standard? Is this clear?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's basically what we are going to say. I don't know where I'm going to put this one, but I want to put it somewhere that you can see it very clearly. Like I said, there is an article of mix and yield, but that article will be redundant if you have listened to what I've said. You should read that article. However, the crux of what that article is arguing is basically what we've said in this section of the video. And there's been a lot of things said. Get the understanding of management having some level of discretion before mix and yield variances are sensible. Because if management doesn't have any discretion, then they will basically use a particular standard. You will not be able to deviate from the standard. And so there will be no real mix and yield variance. And I gave the example of the car, of a standard Mass Pro sedan. So if we are a customized version, then we would have that kind of issue with sentiments and discretion. But if we were a standard mass production car, then there will be no discretion involved. So we're looking at number 1. So the mixed variance now. So let's define them. So the mixed variance you can say occurs when the actual mix, the actual combination of input material into a production process differs from the standard mix. As a result, the actual mix would either be more or less expensive than the standard. So that's our mix variance. Now, on the other hand, our yield variance please remind me by the end of the class, in case I forget out of excitement, about the article that I want to write in your notes, so that when you see it in your exam, you will not blame me. I did my best. So arises when the let me say is a measure of the expected or of the actual output compared to the expected output based on the inputs based on the standard inputs into the process. The yield variance is essentially a measure of quality. So I said the yield variance is a measure of the actual output compared to the expected output based on the standard input into a process, and that the yield, like we said earlier, is a measure of quality, of the quality of output. Okay. Now let's go to our proforma again, and let me show you how this works. In the next 10 minutes, we'll get this, and then we come back and we look at our question. So please look at this. Our proforma for our material variance, our direct material variance. Our proforma was what? Yeah? What's our proforma for direct material?
Standard quantity, standard price.
Standard quantity, standard price.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actual
Quantity, standard price.
Actual quantity, standard price.
Actual quantity,
Yeah.
actual price.
Actual quantity, actual price.
Actual quantity,
Actual price.
actual price. I said the difference between first and second is our usage, right? And the difference between second and third is our price.
Price.
Now let's do the first adjustment, and I'll do it in your front so that you'll be able to see clearly. Now what we'll do is, I said usually when we are making adjustments to our proforma, if we're going to leave the proforma standing as it were, then generally we're going to make adjustment to this second. So we'll add a 1 under the second. So see what we're going to do here. We're just going to add 1 under the second. And basically what we're going to have is actual quantity. Don't worry, standard price. So that's the one we're adding. That's all. So, however, see what I'm going to do now. I'm going to come to the middle of this second one and say this one are the actual mix and the one on top of it are the standard mix. So basically what we'll see here is that we have, now if we think about this now, if we look, as usual, the difference between top and bottom, in this case, is your price variance, right? That's what we said earlier. Difference between this and this is price, right? So here we have our price variance. Difference between this and this is what? Now let's look at this now. If we see this now, actual quantity constant, standard price constant. The only difference is standard mix and actual mix, right?
Yeah.
So what variance be now? Is that what?
Mix variance.
Mix.
It definitely has to
Mix.
be.
Mix.
It definitely has to be mixed, because mix is the only thing that is different between the top and the bottom. And then of course, if that one is mixed, if the one on top is mixed, then the one under has to be the yield variance. So we have standard quantity, standard price. We have actual quantity, standard price. We have another actual quantity, standard price. And we have actual quantity, actual price. And we said we're comparing this so this with this, and then that with that, and then that with that. The difference between 1 and 3 will be our usage. The difference between top and bottom here will be our yield. Of course, and the best way to do this, the only way, or really, for a very long time, the only way I was able to remember this one is to know that since actual quantity, standard price, actual quantity, standard price, the only difference between them is that I have the standard mix on top and the actual mix under. Now, let me help you to remember, because maybe as you go back and after a while, after you do other things, there is a tendency for you to forget. Remember that the last one, the fourth one, is actual, right? Actual quantity, actual price. Are you seeing that? Now, you're going to compare the actual mix. So this actual quantity, actual price is the same thing as saying actual quantity at actual mix times actual price. So you are going to compare actual with actual. So the actual will be close to the actual. And this standard is like standard mix 2 here. So you're going to compare standard with standard. So remember that the standard will be close to the standard on top. Any of the standard, you can look at the standard in the name instead of even the middle one. So the standard will be close to the standard, and then the actual will be close to the actual. So the standard will be close to the standard. The actual will be compared with the actual. That can help you remember that. And
come again. Come again, please.
I said, if you're looking at this, we have said getting serious. So if you're looking at this one, this standard mix, are you seeing what I'm saying? The number 2, and I don't want to mutilate it because I might not be able to erase. This standard mix, you're comparing it to standard. That's why I'm saying that after a while you might forget which one is standard. Where is standard on top or under? This standard and the actual. Do you get what I'm saying? The standard mix and the actual mix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if you remember that the standard would be close to the standard. Since number 1 is standard, then standard in the second one is close to those ones because we are comparing standard with standard. And then the actual will be close to the actual because number 4 is actual. That way you can keep it in your head and not forget. Do you get the point?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's all.
Yeah.
I just want, because we're going to be filling ourselves with a lot of information. If you're able to understand the basics, then life is easy. Okay, so next thing we'll do is, this is our proforma. Let's see how it works. The only thing I'll tell you is that because you have more than one material input, there'll be some variation, there'll be some things that will be dancing around. However, all I'll tell you is that the only one that would be difficult for you is the actual quantity, standard mix, and standard price. And the easiest way, if I start talking about this theoretically, it might not sit down very well. However, if we look at the question, if we're able to see how the thing works, because it's always going to be like that. And that's the great thing about all these things. Once you get it, I was talking earlier on, two people, two different times. And I remember that I was saying, it will never be wrong with the proforma. Can you interpret what is happening? If you can interpret it well, you will see. And if you sit down and look at it properly, you will see that it's you that made a mistake. It's never going to be the proforma. So I don't know. Can you check your book? We have a question on mix and yield. What's the name again?
You have less than 1 minute.
Yeah, I know. What I want us
Revision
to do
kit. No.
is revision kit.
Or the main book.
We're done with study text though. I just found out that that question we did is in the study text.
Yes.
In our own study text, in F5 study text.
Yeah, it is. It's there.
I was so disappointed. So why did we go to another place now?
It's there. It's there.
Okay, I'm looking for the question. I'm looking for, there are not very many. However,
Organic,
I can come out.
organic bread.
Subsequently, let's look at there are two independent questions. We're looking at the second part of the question so that we finish this deal with the production manager and the sales manager and indicate whether the current bonus scheme is fair to those concerned. I think in a fortnight's time, we'll be looking at performance measurement, and that will be a better time for us to look at this part of the question. However, in April, it has many marks, so I want to see how to get 9. If you can get 9 over 9 in this computation, in the exam, you've almost passed. Is everybody there?
I'm there.
Mr. Richard, have you started recording?
No.
Yes, I have.
Mr. Richard?
Yes, I have.
Oh, okay. I wanted us to pause first.
Required. Calculate the material price, mix, and yield variances for April. You are not required to make any comments on the performance of the managers. With the benefit of each side, the management of Crumbly Cakes realizes that a more realistic standard cost for current conditions will be 0.40 per cake dollars. The planned start cost is unrealistically low. Required. Calculate the total cost planning for April. Briefly comment on each variances. And in April 20X9, the following data applied. Standard cost card for 1 cake, not adjusted for the ingredient change. Flour, egg, butter, sugar, total input, normal loss. Should I call it out?
Yeah, I can
Yeah, I
hear
think
you.
you should read. I think you should read from the beginning. Crumbly cake, something, something. That's the beginning of the question.
Okay. Yes. I'm asking, should I read for the numbers, the kg and the dollar? Okay, let me just read.
No, there's
It's good to
not
start from that very
particularly.
beginning.
Maybe you just go up again.
Okay. In April 20X9, the following data applied. The
From
standard
Crumbly Cakes.
cost card for 1 cake. Oh, okay. I should read from
No,
the beginning.
no, just from April. That's only the B part. We're doing only the
Which
B part
question are you
now.
doing?
Crumbly Cakes.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
So in April 20X9, the following data applied. Standard cost card for 1 cake, not adjusted for the organic ingredient change. The budget ingredients: flour, egg, butter, sugar, total input, normal loss 10%, standard weight of a cake. The budget for production and sales in April was 50,000 cakes. Actual production and sales was 60,000 cakes in the month, during which the following occurred. Ingredients used: flour 5,700, egg 6,600, Okay. Floor. You said I should not call the number. So flour, egg, butter, sugar, total input, actual loss, actual output of cake mixture. All cakes produced must weigh 0.36 kg, as this is what is advertised.
Okay, so that's
Okay.
that. That's the question. Okay, so I'll just take you straight to the deep side. Let's go to the other side of it. So we're opening our workstation now. One of the things I want you to remember very clearly about variances is that please appreciate that in a variance question, not every information that is given to you, particularly with the computation, is important. Just follow the structure of the question and you'll be fine. Now, let me go back and say something. Class so quiet.
Yes, Brian.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
we
we
can
can.
hear
We can
you.
hear
Yes,
you.
yes, yes, you can.
Okay, all right. So I said that we should note that the actual quantity standard mix is, let me say, and that's the only important thing for the standard quantity actual mix. You get that? That's the second line, Abi. The second line of our pro forma. For the actual quantity standard mix, we get the total actual quantity, and this will make more sense. This will make more sense as you're working. So get the total actual quantity and compute the proportion of the standard mix for each component input material. So basically what this means now is, so for example, two components, A and B, have a standard mix of, say, 10 and 40 grams. So 10 grams and 40 grams respectively. So if we had two components that had a standard mix of 10 grams and 40 grams respectively, okay, then the total mix, or the total mix will be equal to 50 grams, Abi.
Yeah.
So that's 10 plus 40. Full stop. Therefore, the SM standard mix for A will be equal to 10 divided by 50, while for B, the standard mix will be equal to 40 divided by 50. So in this case, 20% and 80% for A and B. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, Brian.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll just go there and let's work with our question and see how to put things together. And the thing becomes fairly simple once you start working. Like I said, once you practice, you now get very, very comfortable with it. So this question has told us, if you remember the requirement of the question, it told us to calculate the material mix, material price, and material usage. Do you notice anything? Material price, material mix. Oh, okay. Calculate. Is that the question? Calculate the price, mix, and yield.
Price mix and yield, yes.
Price, mix, and yield. Okay. In some questions, they will tell you calculate the mix, yield, and usage. If they tell you mix, yield, and usage, then they didn't ask you for price. And if they didn't ask you for price, they might not give you information for price. As we start working our various questions, one of the things you will see is if they don't ask you for a particular thing, they might not give you information for it. And as we work them, then as you get more comfortable, we'll start varying our, nothing is going to get significantly complex. I think that the hardest variance, the hardest advanced variance is this mix and yield variance. And you'll see how simple it is. So our question, Crumbly Cakes, you say it was question what? I don't want page.
243.
So question 243. So Crumbly Cakes, let's remind ourselves that it's variances. Okay, so mix and yield variance actually. Okay, so we have that. Now we're just going to pick, we're going to set up our performer first. Once we set up our
You
performer.
can't see your listening.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's still on that, on the notes, not on the Excel sheet.
No,
Okay, I'll put it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it there now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we set up our performer now. As we already know, we start with our, what's that? We start with our standard quantity. We leave the space for standard price, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want more than one. So standard price. Then because we have, now let me show you how this will work. Okay. All these things are the things where practice with your spreadsheet become very important, because you must know how to arrange the things quickly. If you get to the hall and that's when you're thinking of how to arrange these things, your time is just going to go too fast and you're not going to be able to do anything. So this is where practice is really important, beyond what someone is doing. What were the components that they had there? Okay, so I'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4, leave space, the other one. So the next one was actual quantity. Actual quantity. Remember that the actual quantity, the top one was at the, or we can finish everything and then come and put them. So that's that. And then we leave space again, 1, 2, 3, 4 space. Then the next one, actual quantity, standard price again. And then we leave space again.
What's guiding you on choosing the number of spaces to leave?
Because I know that there are four components.
Material.
4 of them: flour, egg, butter, sugar.
Yep.
So flour, egg, butter, sugar. And I'm wasting time because I just want you to see it because it's the first one we're doing. So actual quantity, actual price. So the only thing I'll now come and do is, remember that we said the standard actual will be close to actual. So my actual mix will be here. So I can put in bracket actual mix. And then, of course, on top will now be in bracket standard mix. And we said standard quantity is short for what?
Quantity at
The
actual
spaghetti
production. Period of the actual production.
Standard quantity of actual production, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so we can just come and put our flour, egg, butter, sugar. So same thing for the next one. We're going to do for all of them. So flour, egg, butter, sugar. I'm pretty sure that in your exam you should be able to copy all of these things and paste them where you want. Remove this thing now. And then we'll do for the last one too. Okay, so we have flour, egg, butter, sugar for all of them, right? I think we're good. We have everything we need. Now our own is just to start working. So we'll start filling in the blanks as we see appropriate. So like we said, expectedly we would have standard information on top, budgeted information in the middle, and actual information below, right? We said that from the first day.
Yeah.
How these things become so much so that once I see a variance question, I usually don't even think. What I want to do is if we can work together in such a way that you enter into the exam hall and in the variance question, you don't think, you allow your brain to rest during the variance question. Just be working like an idiot until you finish it. Then that would have been I would have achieved my plan for you and your exam. You spend your time thinking on other things because there will be things that you need to think about. Variance is not one of them. You don't need to think for variance. Just be throwing things like that. So we go down and we start from down and we walk up. So we have all of them. Yeah. So we start with our actual quantity, actual price. We said actual quantity, actual price is usually given to us in total terms. So we're expecting it in total, unless otherwise stated. Right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so let's look for it now. What's our actual quantity, actual price? We're going to do for each individual. For flour now is what?
741.
5,700.
For flour,
Thank you very much.
741.
741. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, this times this will give me this as my answer. Then I'll come and put the rest of it there. Okay, so my answer will be there. So 741. The next one.
5,600.
5610.
5,600. Next one.
610.
610.
5,610. That's the second one.
Second one is 5,610.
610.
Next one.
11,880.
11,880. If I have to look at it again, because I don't trust what you're telling me. Next one.
11,008. Next one is 2,747.
2747.
2747. Okay, so we have that. So you've got your marks for that. Life could not have been easier. Okay, so we'll now come. Where should I put that now? if I'm doing my answers here, is this sensible? Okay, so I can reduce this a little bit. Reduce this one significantly. That's where my answers will be. Then come and get my total on top. So my total will be on top instead. Okay, so we are done. I have those figures. So if I want to get my total now, my total was given to me in the question, right?
Yeah.
Always like to write our total
2978.
on that line. So we'll just say is equal to, just to check, is equal to the sum of everything below it. So is there any way this thing can just remove itself so that I can see what I'm looking for? Wow, it's not good. I can't see the last one. Okay, so I've gotten all of them. So let's check that it should give us the same figure. So 2978, right? Yeah, so that's fine. So we got that. We move on. Let me come and do my workings here. So all my workings, I'll put my workings just beside it, the way I like it. So workings. Okay, so when we get to our workings, we'll put our workings. So now next thing is our actual quantity. So we need our actual quantity for each of them. So what's my actual quantity for flour?
5,700.
Remember where you're looking for quantity. 5,700.
6,600.
6,600.
6,600.
6,600 again.
Yeah. 4,578.
4,578.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Since we said our actual quantity, actual mix is at the actual mix is still actual, so nothing spoiled. We leave it like that. Now our standard price. What's our standard price for flour?
Flour 0.12. 0.12.
0.12.
0.12. Me and you. Next one.
0.70.
0.70.
0.70. Next.
1.70.
1.70.
So 1.7. And the last one.
0.50.
0.5. So that's fine. We have that. With that now, you can feel free to come and get your answers. So my first answer will be equal to this multiplied by, okay, since they're not near each other, I don't know whether it will work. Except I absolute it. If it doesn't work, I will absolute it.
It's supposed to work.
Okay, it worked, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that. We're done. Now we now come to, so we're done with 2. We've gotten some marks here. So we get our total. So what's our total now? Our total will be equal to the sum of all the things under it. That's our total. So we can just make our totals bold so that we remember where they are. And then we now go to our actual quantity standard mix. That's the one that has, so you see the first one was so easy. We're just copying and pasting from the question. The second one, we have to copy 2 things and multiply them. By the third one, it now becomes a little more interesting. So we have to do our actual quantity. First of all, we'll need to get our total actual quantity to be able to do that. So total actual, so let's call this work 1. Total actual quantity. Our total actual quantity will be, what's our total actual quantity? We already had it there now.
23,478.
Calculated it before. total of all of this question, right? Can anybody hear me?
You are
You are
breaking, Brian.
breaking, but I can hear you now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, so let me go back. Let me go back to what I was saying. I said my total actual quantity will be the sum of all the actual quantities. Is that fine?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just come and sum all these things here.
No problem. Go ahead. I'm with you.
Okay, so I'll sum all of them. And people to know where we got this total actual quantity from. Maybe I should carry that thing down and show what I did, right? It's just going to waste my time. So control, let me just carry it down.
Okay, or you call on quick.
You said what?
In the other room.
It's not you.
I wanted him to know that I was hearing you. So my total actual quantity would have been equal to, please can you call those figures for me? I'm just writing this one out so that I'll guide people that are looking at it.
5,700. No, I'll come.
5,700.
Oh, we can get it now. We'll tap on that
Plus
and we'll know.
6,600.
Man, Cyril, if they've ever called you at 11 to tell you that, sorry, I can't sleep, I just want to find where you people got this figure from. Where you guys, if they've ever done you that thing before, then you will know why I used to protect myself. You will be sleeping that time now. You say, I don't know where you guys with phone. It can be. Okay, so let's do our next one, I beg. So work 2. So we've gotten our actual quantity, total actual quantity. Now let's do our standard mix. So our standard mix. Now our standard mix will be, what's the mix for each of them? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah, I can hear you.
For each of them is 0.1. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yep. Yes.
So just to help people that will be reading. So I'll just write flour, egg, butter, and sugar. And then, no, sugar. So the mix now. So the mix is 0.1 each, Abi. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So 0.1 for each of them. So our total mix now. So the total
0.4.
is equal to so of course expectedly 0.4. So we have, that's our total mix now. So it means that the proportion for each of them so the proportion for each of them in the standard mix will be equal to that 0.1 divided by the total. In some cases, I will leave it like that. So of course, we expect that to be the same for all of them. So I can copy. So I should make the 0.4 absolute first. No.
Please come back. Please, can you? We didn't hear what you were saying. You're breaking up.
Okay, I said that the proportion is the same thing for all of them. So let me do it again. This divided by the total. So that's the proportion for all of them. You get what I'm saying now?
Yeah.
And so that's the same thing for all of them. Divided by the total. Is that fine?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the small time we have, we can throw these things inside. So we have that information. And this, because this one is 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, it doesn't look like anything. But if you think about it, the proportion, if you have four equal things, then the proportion is 25% for each of them. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, our actual mix now, that's the funny thing. Our actual mix for the second one or for the third one, if we're working from down, our actual mix will be the same for all the components. Our actual quantity, rather, sorry, our actual quantity will be the same. So we'll go and pick that figure that we calculated. It's the same thing for all of them. So everything will have that same, of course, it won't work. And all these things are so. So where am I going to make this absolute sign that to work from? Am I going to absolute everything here?
You can copy from the top, run.
From the top where?
Just like you go to E for eggs, and then you just copy it. Copy what's on top.
Where's the E for eggs? E for eggs.
Where the 0 is.
Okay, from here now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, okay. So I'll just be copying it from the top, Abi. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a lot faster. So it's equal to that. So we're using exactly the same figures. That's the point I was trying to make. Okay, so that's fine. Absolutely, have been too much work. Okay, so that's fine. Then our standard mix is to same thing. So we'll just go and copy is equal to, of course, it has to be related to each of them. So that, then this one is equal to next one. Then this one is equal to the one after that. And then the final one is equal to the one after that. So that's that. And then our standard prices, we already had our standard prices downstairs, Abi. Standard price will not change. So we can copy our standard price and put it for each of them for the two on top. So the standard price is the same for the one on top again. Right? Is this clear to everybody?
Yes.
So we're done. So we can come and get total for this one now.
Sorry. All of them the same, 23, 4, 7, 8. Did you hear me?
Yeah, I'm coming.
Okay.
What we're doing, see, if we look at the second one, or sorry, if we look at the third, actual quantity, actual mix, standard price, the actual quantity at the actual mix is actually what it is. So if we had done actual quantity, what we would have done would have been, if we wanted to do actual quantity at the actual mix, then we would have done 5.7 divided by the total times that same total. It would have still given us the 5.7. So it didn't make any sense finding an actual mix. We would have gotten the actual mix as this as a proportion of the total multiplied by this again. It will still give us the same 5.7. So this one did not make any sense. However, the actual quantity at the standard mix, what we are saying is we're looking for, supposing this total figure, supposing this 23,478 was broken down into the proportion of what it should have been in the standard. So that means for each of them, it should have been 25% of this 23,478. So one thing you should know, and one thing you should remember in this way that we compute, we will never change it. The second column, that is our actual quantity standard mix at standard price, will be the total quantity multiplied by the proportion in the standard mix. Because we want to say, supposing 25% of this actual quantity was given to flour, 25% was given, that's what it should have been in the standard. However, in the actual, it is different, and we can see the difference. Let's come and say some things now. Oh, okay, those figures are here. So 5.7, 6.6, 6.6, and 4.5. 4578. Now, what should they have been if they were in the? It should have been. Let me come. I will remove this thing now. They should have been equal to that total figure divided by 4, right? Each of them should have been 25%. So
Yes,
each of them should have been. Yes, but now the idea is this: in the actual, they are not that figure now. They are not 5869.5. They are 576666 and 4578. Now I want to ask you a question, just to push to see whether we have started getting to that point of understanding beyond just nonsensical computations. Let's see whether we can push ourselves. Now, what do we expect this mixed variance to be? Should it be favorable or adverse based on our earlier discussion? And please don't say favorable, and then when I frown, you say adverse. Then when I frown again, you will say favorable. Think about it, please. What it should have been, the standard mix should have been, all of them should have contributed 5870 approximately. Now, what happened was flour, egg, butter, sugar. We can look at their standard prices to give us an understanding of what I'm saying. What's the most expensive? What's the most expensive of flour, egg, butter, sugar? Nobody's asking you to do
butter.
Butter, of course. Followed by eggs. Then
then flour. I know.
Then sugar.
12 is gone.
Yes.
Flour.
Flour is the cheapest now. 12 is less than 0.5, 0.7. This is 0.12. This is 50. This is 70. That's 12. 12 is less than any of the other ones. Flour is the cheapest, right?
Yes.
Now, what each of them should have been 5869 or 5870. Now, but in the actual mix, flour was 57. Flour is the cheapest, right? So the cheapest was lower than what it should have been in the standard. Do you understand that? And I'm ready to pause. I want you to get this. Do you get that the cheapest is less than what it should have been in the standard, right? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Your line is breaking.
Can you hear me?
Your line, I can't hear, but it was breaking.
Okay, can you hear me now? I think it's stable now.
I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
Okay, I said, so what we will see here is that the cheapest one is less than what it should have been. Actually, what you put actual is less than what it should have been by standard, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm saying flour. Flour is the cheapest now.
Yeah.
Flour is 12 cents. So flour per gram is the cheapest, and it is less. Now, the other one is what? Is egg. Egg is, what's egg? Egg is the second most expensive, right?
Yes.
No.
Yes, it is.
No.
Yes.
Okay, yes. Yes.
Egg is the second most expensive, and it is more actually than in the standard, right?
Sorry, Brian, where is the actual this you're comparing with the standard?
Actual is the one down.
Actually is the 5766 and 4578. That's the actual.
Yes, then where is the standard you are using now?
The standard is 25% of the total actual. So what it should have been based on this 23,478 should have been 5. That is 23,478 divided by 4, because they said that the mix should have been 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. So they should have been equal contributors. You get you up to there?
Yes.
Now, so it means that in the standard, if this actual quantity should have been used the way it should have been in the standard, then both flour, egg, butter, and sugar should have been, the total, their grams should have been 5870 or 5869.5 for each of them. However, we are seeing that in the actual mix, actually we used 57 of flour instead of 5869.5. We used 66 of egg. Now we used more of the second most expensive. We also used more of the most expensive, and we used less of the second least expensive. So basically, we are using more of the more expensive ones and less of the cheaper ones. Are you seeing that in our actual than our standard? What do we expect our mixed variance to be?
Adverse.
Adverse.
Yes, adverse, because we are using too much expensive ones. So our mixed variance should be adverse. And as a proportion, we should generally expect that our yield variance will generally be favorable, because mix and yield, they generally have, usually when the mix is favorable, the yield will be adverse and vice versa. So when the mix is adverse, the yield will usually compensate by being favorable. If we use more expensive, then the mix will be adverse, but we expect that the quality will go up as a result of using more expensive. So when we get to the end now, we're expecting that our mix variance should be adverse and our yield variance should be favorable. Now that's the end of the story. That's the point of understanding you get to, and you know it finished. So let's continue our work. However, just know that this second column will always be total. Then we find the standard mix. And the standard mix will be the proportion of each individual component to the total mix. So every time we will get our mix individually and get the total of them and do the contribution for this one divided by the total and get the proportion for all of them. Is this clear?
Yeah, or in this question, the proportion is uniform, which should not be expected at all times.
So we got, no, it will not be, this is a very, it's very rare self. It's only this one that we're seeing it. We might not see it again. But is this fine so far? Ella, you've been quiet too.
No, I'm listening.
I'm listening, I'm understanding. I'm listening is usually what I say.
I'm understanding. I'm understanding very well.
Okay. Because usually when I tell you I'm listening, or I hear you doesn't mean, hear you means I hear you, but I don't understand you. You could as well be speaking Latin. Is what I hear you means. Okay, so we go to the up one now. Standard quantity. What's our standard quantity for each of these ones? Okay, we've not gotten our total yet. Okay, so let me multiply. I did the first one. I expect that thing should work for all of them. Hopefully it does. Yes, it did. So I can get my total now. So my total will be equal to the sum of all of them, right? Everybody with me? I should have done this thing first before I started explaining. Are you there?
Yes, yes.
I'm here.
Okay, all right. So that's our total. So we did multiply this multiplied by this multiplied by this. So we go to the final part now, and that's our actual, our standard quantity. Our standard quantity from the question is what, and what?
Question.
Okay.
It's 0.1, 0.1.
0.1, 0.1, 0.1.
Standard quantity. Oh, it's true. 0.1, 0.1, 0.1.
But at the actual,
okay.
At the actual
production.
Yeah,
Actual production was 60,000.
Quantity 0.1. I know it won't work again. Why doesn't this thing just work now? Let's press. Okay, it did. So what is your, you said standard quantity is short for standard quantity of actual production. So what's your actual production?
60,000.
60,000.
60,000 actual production and sale of cake was 60,000. God bless you. And with this, you've done the first one. So 60,000 and 60,000 is constant. 60,000 for each of them. Each of them is 60,000. So we can come here and say is equal to the first one multiplied the second one multiplied the third one. Done. We carry that figure, drag it down. Done. Carry it up And then we have that is equal to the sum of all of them. And with that, like Napoleon once said, we passed him. So that's all, my people. I did it. So we can now come and say, what is our usage variance, right? Okay, let me leave this space. Sorry, what's our yield and what is our
Price.
mix and what is the other one?
Price.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So now we just want to do our mix first of all. Our mix will be top minus bottom, Abi. That's our yield first. So yield is the first one. So yield, we could have started from the under as usual, but it's fine. So our yield variance would be what? The other way.
Yield variance will be 394.11 favorable.
Favorable.
Yeah, please just permit me. I'm trying to arrange it in a way that. Okay, so yield variance now. Our yield variance would be equal to the top minus the bottom. So this minus that one, Abi. So is that favorable or adverse?
Favorable.
Favorable.
Brian, where's Ayo?
Which Ayo? Ayo girl?
Yes.
Maybe she has eaten plenty after this today's fast that was very rough for her. She has slept. That's why as soon as if they give me any opportunity to talk when they are trying to decide whether we should be showing our face in class, I will support it. And if they say they want to do something to people that don't show their face, I will still support it. Because when you go, the thing is, I'm trying to help you from yourself. When you make the habit of not showing your face, you will drift and nobody will be able to help you. See how long it took us before we noticed. But it's fine. We'll find out. So we've gotten our yield variance. Let's get our mix variance now. So mix is in the middle, which is the first thing we should have put. So our mix variance now, same thing, is equal to top. So let's come now. What did we say before? What did we say we were expecting?
Adverse.
We are expecting an adverse which one? And favorable which
Adverse
one?
mix and favorable yield.
So we're expecting an adverse mix and a favorable yield. And you see that it checks out. Can you see that?
Yeah.
It was expected. I just said, I thought it was Ayo's voice. Okay. And then we do our price variance. Usually, they might ask you to do for the individuals. They might ask you for the, no, Ayo was recording that time now. Ayo is here.
She's around.
She was recording that time.
I'm here. I'm recording.
Why did you allow us to abuse you like this? Okay, you went somewhere. You just came back now.
I went to pray. So if you're insulting me.
We've abused you. The abuse have not been, let me not lie. And I can call the name of people that are abusing you.
I started it.
We've abused you. No, it's more abuse. Even myself, I know that if they abuse somebody like that, the person should vest.
Wait, when is Big Salah, sir? I hope they will allow them.
Concentrate and do
public holiday, they hungry you.
So Ramsey, they hungry you for this time.
Now.
Okay, so we do the final one. Let's do the final thing. Our final thing is our price variance. And like I said, in many cases, it will make more sense. And I can go on differently, or maybe in another question when we're discussing. But to make more sense for you to do the price variances individually rather than as a total price variance. So you might have to do the price variance so that you will see where the issues are with pricing. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to go and set up our price variance individually.
No.
You said?
What do you mean individually?
You don't get what I'm saying.
Like now, you do the different.
Sorry?
I didn't hear you, sir.
Okay, you said you will do it individually. What do you mean by that?
So instead of doing the total price variance here now, instead we'll do like this 684 minus 741, and then do 4620 minus 5610. So in that case, when they ask you for, the question might specify individual price variances or individual mixed variances. Yield variance doesn't make any sense to do individually. So they can never ask you for an individual yield, but they can ask you for individual mix or individual price. Then what you would do for mix now would have been, remember that the mix was this minus this, so it would be 704.34 minus 684 for flour, then 4108.65 minus 4620 for egg, and so on and so forth. So that's individual variance. They might ask you for the individual, for the material components, for the material.
But is that the individual? Is the individual not to be from the bottom? That's 741, not 64.
Yeah, I didn't hear you.
If you're meant to do individuals,
I didn't get that point.
It's meant to be the actual.
No, individual price variance will always be top minus
bottom. And top minus
nothing will ever change for your top minus bottom. There will never be any time. See, don't use logic, don't use anything. As this performer is like this, once you get the performer, you will never make an adjustment to it. So there's no time. See, I've done, God knows how many variances I've done in this life. There's no time that you will make an adjustment. If you make an adjustment because under exam condition or something, if you enter into the hall and you still need to make an adjustment, then the village people have won. That one is not, nobody sent you for that one. It was never, ever required of you. There's no time to use logic or to use discretion. Just set your performer and do this minus this. You never ever turn it upside down. There's no time I will say, just for this special case, don't turn it upside down. Leave it like that.
Brad, what I was saying, Brad.
So the price. Yes, sir.
Total price variance is meant to be which one?
Yes.
Total price variance.
The third minus the fourth.
Third minus
the third minus
so
the fourth.
If the third minus the fourth is the total price, individual should be third, fourth, third, fourth, two, not third and second,
exactly.
Third and second.
Third minus four. No, I went to the mix when I was saying that 70434 minus
that was
6,
what I was asking.
8, 4. Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that. And I it's not because of what you asked me, more than that I'm saying generally, because I discussed with Kingsley earlier, I discussed with Cyril earlier, and there were times when people are asking, maybe for capacity variance, should we change? That's what I'm trying to emphasize. At no time should you alter your performer. Your performer will just be like that. As long as you can interpret the questions well into the performer, you're fine. You get what I'm saying, sir? It's because of other questions, not because of this one that you asked me that I made that comment.
No,
and I want to emphasize that. Okay, so we go to our price variance now. Our total price variance will be equal to this. Taye, you asked for the question, Abby. Taye here. I like it when. So that's what now? Favorable or adverse?
It's adverse. 2165.
Life is very easy because, of course, it's negative. So since we've gotten it as negative, then it's adverse. So we've gotten our mix, yield, and price variance, like the question asks us. We banned the 10 marks. The only other thing we can come and do is the individual price variances, just so that we'll have that, and then we can go. So our individual price variances, this shouldn't take us any time.
So, Brian, the normal loss that was put there is just like a distractor.
Yeah, all those things are not because of the way we work it.
Okay.
And I said that earlier, that sometimes be careful so that you don't, it's not everything you see that you need. Just pick what you need based on your pro forma. End of story. Don't try and make any, don't try and say, because I saw something, let me try and make an adjustment. There's no need for it. So I have that figure. Then I have my actual quantity standard price. So I can pick those figures. That's what I need now. Control X. Control V. And then I have my, so that's that one. On top of it should be actual quantity, standard price. And then I can pick the figures for actual quantity, actual price now.
You pulled out everything.
Didn't copy.
No, I've not.
You cut it. You cut it, not copy.
Yeah, I'm just copying it because I know that it will be very simple for me to do. So that's actual quantity, actual price, and then my variance. So my variance will be equal to this minus the other one. And then I'll feel comfortable to drag. So that if you want my total now, I can come to my total. So do you get what I'm saying? My total price variance, it must check out with the other one on top. So my total price variance variance, it must check out to some. So it has to be exactly the same thing with this. You see that they are the same, Abi? Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
So it's exactly the same thing with what we had on top. So ADV. So we have only adverse variances. All of them are adverse. And all the variances are adverse. So our total is adverse too.
Mr. Brian.
Yes, sir. Yes, sorry.
Back the actual quantity standard price figures here, please. You cut it totally. You cut the
that's what Mr. Rashid was telling me. Or I think it was who was telling me that. Richard, and I didn't realize. Oh, sorry. Okay, I cut everything. I cut it twice, Seth. Wonderful. I didn't even notice when you were telling me. I was wondering what you were saying. I didn't notice it. Oh, I think it was Richard that was saying nothing. I didn't notice it. This one is now serious. Oh. I knew it will not work now. It cannot work. I have to do it again. But it's fine. It's only one.
No, it will work. Just copy and take back. It will work.
I copied it. It didn't work. Oh. Don't worry. It's fine. If I just do the first one, it will work for all of them. So we're done. Any question, please?
No.
So that's our introduction. And like I said, most of the time our best work might most likely be done. Tai, have you gotten the question yet? because you're not saying anything, nobody can know what is happening. Have you gotten the question, Yatai? Is Taye there? Okay, is there any question, anything that we should be worried about? Anything? Is everybody fine with this?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I'm fine with it.
I didn't hear you. Ella, you're fine, Abby?
Yes.
Expectedly. And there's no complaint, there's no question. I think something is right about it. Please just remember that for the second one, just remember that in your pro forma, that's the only hard part of mix and yield. For this, and don't be confused that you don't use the total in the third one. The actual quantity, actual mix is already the actual quantity. So you don't need any adjustment for the actual quantity, actual mix. If you've not heard anything today, remember that the third part of your pro forma, the actual quantity, actual mix, just go and pick the actual quantity in the figure. But in the second part of your pro forma, the actual quantity standard mix, you first get the total actual quantity, and then you get the standard mix as a proportion. Once you can do that, then you're fine. And always remember that your standard quantity is short for standard quantity of actual production. Once you know those things, then you know exactly what to look for in a question. The only other thing they can do is to adjust it so that your relationship between kilogram and gram, liters and what's it? Liter and is there anything they use after liter?
Centiliter.
Centiliter, milliliter, all those things. That's the only problem you're going to have. But if it is any other thing, everything will just be as it were. This question is generally looked at as a hard question, and see how simple it is. If there's no other question, then we can
How early are you sending this one to
adjourn
the
for
group?
Saturday. Sir?